Rain in Blackwood Creek. Didn't wash things clean, it just made the mud deeper, and on this particular Tuesday. Elara felt that mud all the way to her bones. She stood on the porch of the only home she had ever known. A heavy canvas duffel bag sat at her feet. It was wet. The door in front of her was closed, locked. She could hear the deadbolt slide home, with a sound like a gunshot. She didn't knock, she knew better than to knock. Mrs. Gable had made it very clear. 18. The woman had said, her voice shaking with something that looked like fear but felt like hate. The state says I don't have to keep you past 18, and God says I shouldn't have kept you a day. Elara reached up and touched her left cheek. She didn't need a mirror to know what it looked like. She knew every inch of the deep, violet stain that covered half her face. It wasn't a birthmark. It looked like ink, like something was broken under the skin. It branched out like lightning, running from her temple down to her jaw, dark and throbbing. The town called it the devil's fingerprint. The kids at school called it the rot, and Elara called it the reason she was standing in the rain with $40 in her pocket and nowhere to go. She picked up her bag. She didn't look back at the house. There was no love there to miss. She started walking toward the edge of town, toward the woods. She had a plan. It wasn't a good plan, but it was the only one she had. There was a rumor in Blackwood Creek, a story the old folks whispered about the house on the hill. The Vance estate. They said Dr. Silas Vance lived there. They said he was a monster. They said he had been fired from the big city hospitals because he tried to play God. But Elara didn't care about monsters. She was one. She walked for an hour. The rain turned to sleet. Her cheap coat soaked through in minutes. By the time she reached the iron gates of the Vance estate, her teeth were chattering so hard her jaw ached. The house was dark, massive. It looked like a tomb that had grown windows. She walked up the driveway. She didn't know it yet. But the man inside that house had been watching her for a long time. He had been waiting for this day, and he was the only person in the world who knew what was really running through her veins. Elara reached the heavy oak door. She raised her fist to knock, but before she could touch the wood, the door swung open. Dr. Silas Vance stood there. He was tall, thin. He wore a gray sweater that looked expensive, and eyes that looked exhausted. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't ask what she wanted. He just looked at the violet mark on her face. Then he stepped back. "You're late, Elara," he said. He turned and walked into the darkness of the house. "Come in before you freeze the specimen." Elara froze. Specimen? She almost turned around, almost ran back into the woods, but the cold was biting at her skin, and she had nowhere else to go. She stepped inside. The house smelled like antiseptic and old books. It was warm, the kind of warm that makes your skin tingle after being out in the cold. Dr. Vance walked straight into a room off the main hallway. It wasn't a living room, it was a laboratory. Real medical equipment lined the walls. Monitors beeped with a slow, steady rhythm. "Sit," he said, pointing to a leather exam chair in the center of the room. Elara dropped her bag. She sat. The leather was cold. Dr. Vance pulled a rolling stool over. He sat knee-to-knee with her. He reached out. Elara flinched. She pulled her head back. "Don't touch it," she whispered. It's cursed." She believed it. She had been told it every day for 18 years. If you touch it, you get sick. "That's what Mrs. Gable said. That's why I had to eat alone." Dr. Vance didn't pull his hand back. He paused. He looked her right in the eye. "Mrs. Gable is an idiot." He reached out again. This time, Elara let him. His fingers were cool, dry. He traced the edge of the violet mark on her cheek. He didn't look disgusted. He looked fascinated. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Sometimes," Elara said. "When I'm scared, it burns." "It's not burning," he said. "It's reacting." "Reacting to what?" "To adrenaline, to cortisol, to life." He stood up and walked to a cabinet. He pulled out a syringe. "Give me your arm." Elara gripped the armrests. "Why? What are you going to do?" "I'm going to prove them wrong, Elara. I'm going to prove all of them wrong." The needle slid in. He drew a vial of blood, but the blood wasn't right. Under the bright halogen light of the lab, the blood in the vial looked different. It was red, yes, but it shimmered. It had a strange, golden undertone, like oil on water. Dr. Vance held it up to the light. "Beautiful," he whispered. He looked at her. "Do you know why your mother left you at the fire station, Elara?" Elara felt a lump in her throat. "Because she saw me, because she saw the monster." "No," Vance said. He walked over to a safe in the corner of the room. "She left you because she was being hunted." He pulled out a file. It was yellow with age. He tossed it onto her lap. She opened it. There was a photo, a woman. She looked just like Elara, but her face was clear. No mark, no violet stain. That's Mary, Vance said. She was my patient 20 years ago. Elara stared at the photo. She touched the face of the mother she never knew. She didn't have the mark, Elara said. No, Vance replied. She didn't have the capacity. She was just the carrier. He leaned in close. You aren't sick, Elara. You are the evolution. The words didn't make sense. Evolution. Vance pointed to the vial of blood. That mark on your face isn't a curse. It's a saturation point. Your body produces something that shouldn't exist, an antibody. He walked to the window and looked out at the rain. For centuries, doctors have looked for a universal cure, a way to tell the human immune system to stop attacking itself, to kill cancer without killing the patient. He turned back to her. Your blood does that. Elara shook her head. No, you're lying. I'm poison. Mrs. Gable said my touch makes flowers die. Mrs. Gable forgets to water her plants, Vance snapped. He walked back to her. Your blood is worth $1 billion, Elara. Maybe more, but that's not why your mother hid you. Why? Elara asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Because there are companies who wouldn't ask for a donation, Vance said darkly. They would take the whole source. I've been watching you for 18 years, keeping the town afraid of you. Elara blinked. You. I started the rumors, Vance said. I told the old women in town that the mark was bad luck. I told the school nurse it was contagious if they got too close. Elara stood up. Her chair scraped loud against the floor. You made them hate me, she screamed. You made me alone, I made you safe. Vance roared back. If they loved you, they would have looked closer. If they looked closer, they would have seen the truth. And if they saw the truth, you would be in a cage in a lab in Switzerland right now. He took a breath. I isolated you to save you. Elara backed away. She felt sick. All the lonely lunches. The prom she wasn't allowed to attend. It was him. It was all him. I'm leaving, she said. She grabbed her bag. You can't leave, Vance said. Not tonight. Why? Because, he said, nodding toward the window. Mrs. Gable just called the sheriff. Elara looked out at the bottom of the hill. Blue lights were flashing, and behind the police cruiser, there were trucks, pickup trucks, a lot of them. They didn't come for me, Elara said. No, Vance said. He walked to his desk and pulled a gun from the drawer. They came for us. The glass of the front window shattered. A brick landed on the rug. Outside, a voice shouted through a megaphone. It wasn't the police. It was the town mayor. Send her out, Vance. We know what you're doing. Elara looked at the doctor. What do they think you're doing? They think I'm doing rituals, Vance said calmly, or experiments. It doesn't matter. Fear makes people stupid. And stupid people are dangerous. Another brick. This one hit the lamp. The room went dim. We have to go, Vance said. He grabbed a hard drive from the desk, the back tunnels. This house was built during the Prohibition. He grabbed her arm. Elara pulled back. No, Vance stopped. What? I'm not running, she said. Elara, listen to me. There are 50 people out there. They have torches. They have guns. This isn't a debate. I'm tired of running, she said. Her voice was shaking, but her feet were planted. I spent my whole life hiding because you told them to be scared. She walked toward the door. If I run now, I'm just the monster they think I am. Elara. Vance lunged for her, but he was too slow. She opened the front door. The cold air hit her like a wall. The shouting stopped. There were at least 40 people standing in the driveway. The rain was sleeting down, sizzling on the flares some of the men were holding. Sheriff Miller stood in the front. Mrs. Gable was next to him, pointing a finger. There she is. Mrs. Gable yelled. Look at her face. It's glowing. It wasn't glowing. It was just the reflection of the police lights, but the crowd gasped. Elara stepped onto the porch. She didn't cover her face. She didn't look down. I'm not cursed, she yelled. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. I'm just a girl. I've lived here my whole life. I sat behind you in math class, Sarah. A man in the back threw a rock. It hit Elara in the shoulder. She stumbled back, crying out in pain. That's enough. Vance stepped out behind her. He raised the gun. The sheriff pulled his weapon. Drop it, Silas, or what? Vance yelled, you'll shoot a doctor, you'll shoot a child. She's not a child. Mrs. Gable screamed, she's a plague. My grandson is in the hospital right now because he sat next to her on the bus last week. He can't breathe. She did this. The crowd murmured. Anger was rising. The mob was ready to move. Vance lowered the gun. Is that true? He asked. About your grandson. He's dying. Mrs. Gable sobbed. His lungs are failing. The doctors say there's nothing they can do. It's a curse. Vance looked at Elara. Then he looked at the crowd. "Bring him here," Vance said. The crowd went silent. "What?" Mrs. Gable asked. "Bring the boy here," Vance said. "Right now, you'll kill him," she screamed. "He's already dying," Vance said. "You said it yourself." He holstered the gun. He put his hands up. "Give me 10 minutes. If I can't save him, you can burn this house to the ground." The sheriff looked at Mrs. Gable. She was trembling. "Bring him," the sheriff said. 10 minutes later, a heavy silence hung over the hill. An ambulance had arrived. The paramedics wheeled a stretcher onto the porch. On it lay a boy, 7 years old. His face was blue. He was gasping for air. "Pneumonia, aggressive, bacterial." Vance looked at Elara. "This is it," he whispered. "What do I do?" Elara asked. Vance pulled a scalpel from his pocket. He sterilized it with a lighter. "Trust me," he said. He turned to the crowd. "You call her cursed," Vance said, his voice carrying over the wind. "You threw her out like trash." He took Elara's hand. He turned it palm up. "You say she brings death." He made a small, quick cut on Elara's palm. She winced. A drop of bright, shimmering red blood welled up. "But tonight," Vance said, "she brings life." He moved to the boy. He didn't inject it. He simply pressed the drop of blood onto a small open sore on the boy's arm. It shouldn't have worked that way. It shouldn't have been that fast, but Elara's blood wasn't normal. The contact was immediate. The boy gasped. His back arched. The crowd surged forward, thinking Vance had hurt him, but then the boy took a breath, a deep, clear breath. The blue tint in his lips began to fade. Pink returned to his cheeks. The rattling in his chest stopped. The boy opened his eyes. "Mom," he whispered. Mrs. Gable collapsed on the porch. She crawled toward the stretcher. She touched her grandson's face. He was warm. He was breathing. She looked up at Vance. Then, slowly, she turned her head to look at Elara. Elara was holding her hand, watching the blood clot. The mark on her face looked darker than ever against her pale skin. "What did you do?" Mrs. Gable whispered. "I didn't do anything," Elara said softly. Vance stepped forward. "She gave him the only thing she has," he said to the crowd. "The thing you hated her for." He looked at the townspeople. They had lowered their rocks. They had lowered their flares. Shame was washing over them like the rain. "Her blood carries a universal antibody," Vance announced. "It's rare. 1 in a billion. And instead of hiding it, instead of selling it, she just used it to save the grandkid of the woman who kicked her out." He looked at Elara with something like pride. "That's not a curse, folks. That's a miracle." The sheriff holstered his gun. He took off his hat. Mrs. Gable stood up. She walked over to Elara. She reached out a trembling hand. Elara didn't flinch this time. Mrs. Gable touched the violet mark on Elara's cheek. "I'm sorry," the old woman wept. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." Elara didn't pull away. She didn't scream. She just looked at the woman who had made her life hell. "It's okay," Elara said, and she meant it, because for the first time in 18 years, she didn't feel like a monster. The next morning, the news vans arrived, not just local news, national. Vance had released the findings. The medical world was in chaos. They were calling Elara the golden patient. Pharmaceutical companies were calling. Hospitals were begging for a pint of her blood. Elara sat on the porch of the Vance estate, watching the sun come up. Dr. Vance walked out with 2 mugs of coffee. "You know," he said, "you could stay here. The town wants to throw you a parade now. Mrs. Gable is baking a cake." Elara smiled. It was a sad smile. "I can't stay," she said. "Why not?" "Because they only love me now, because they know what I can do for them," she said. She took the coffee. "I need to go somewhere where I'm just Elara, not a curse, not a cure. Just me." Vance nodded. He understood. He handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" "A plane ticket," he said, "and a letter of recommendation to a research institute in Zurich. They don't care about money. They care about science. They'll keep you safe." Elara stood up. She picked up her canvas bag. She walked to the gate. The town of Blackwood Creek looked peaceful in the morning light. It looked like a nice place to live, but it wasn't her home. It never had been. She looked back at Dr. Vance. "Thank you," she said, "for saving me." Vance asked. "No," Elara said. She touched her cheek. "For telling me the truth." She turned and walked down the road. She still had the mark on her face. People would still stare, but let them stare. She knew what she was now. She wasn't a curse. She was the cure.